The man arrives at his late wife's funeral with his mistress on his arm, completely ignoring the loyalty and dignity his wife maintained while she was alive. And with shocking audacity he lets his greedy eyes wander over the alluring curves of the woman beside him. Standing nearby with a complicated expression is another woman, the deceased woman's cousin, Bet. Bet recalls the last time she saw her cousin, facing the sister who lay dying in bed. She showed not a trace of sorrow. The two of them had grown up together since childhood, yet the elders of the family sent Bet away to the countryside while her cousin stayed in the ancestral home and received an excellent education. When she grew up, she carried a generous dowry and married a baron as a noble lady. Bet, now past 40 and still unmarried, can only survive by doing odd jobs. Whenever her cousin is mentioned, the unspeakable grievance and jealousy buried in Betty's heart fills her with resentment. Her cousin's last words on her deathbed were a request for Bet to take good care of her little daughter, Hortense. She had already lost all confidence in that pleasure-seeking husband of hers. Faced with a relative whose life was slipping away, Bet reluctantly agreed. After the funeral ended, only Hortense and the entire household truly mourned the loss of her mother, while everyone else behaved as if that person had never existed. Bet believed that her brother-in-law would surely marry her and make her his new wife. She imagined herself soon becoming the mistress of this household, and she almost laughed out loud at the thought. But to her surprise, the Baron, in front of his son, daughter-in-law, and daughter Hortense, announced that he wanted to hire her as the household's housekeeper. Bet was utterly disappointed, and she realized that her brother-in-law only wanted her to take care of his daughter. Bet refused the proposal. She would rather stay in her chaotic and shabby rented room, working as a seamstress barely able to support herself, than become a servant in her cousin's household. A theater troupe invited Bet to sew costumes for their actresses. One actress named Jenny came from the countryside just like Bet. The hardship of leaving their hometowns to struggle in Paris and their similar upbringing quickly made them close friends who could talk about anything. But Jenny was open-minded, sweet-looking, and irresistibly charming, and she always had many admirers around her. Bet, on the other hand, held traditional values and was extremely conservative. Her life dull and monotonous, and she had never even experienced the thrill of a first romance in secret. While Jenny moved gracefully among different gentlemen and attended all kinds of social gatherings, Bet stayed alone in her rented room, quietly enduring the endless pain brought by loneliness. Yet her pride compelled her to appear calm and content whenever she faced other people. When her niece asked why she had never married, Bet lied and claimed that she actually already had a deeply devoted boyfriend, but she refused to let marriage become a chain that bound her, which was why she remained unmarried. As Hortense listened to her aunt's imaginary love story, she could not help wondering where her own Prince Charming might be. However, neither Hortense nor Bet knew that the Baron, because of his reckless spending and chaotic private life, now possessed nothing more than the empty title of nobility. The family fortune had already run dry, and bankruptcy was approaching. Hortense had reached the age for marriage, but since the Baron could not afford a dowry worthy of their status, every young nobleman who came to propose was rejected by her. In order to help himself out of trouble, the blind dates the Baron arranged for his daughter were truly difficult to look at. One was a white-haired old man pretending to be youthful, and the other was a short and overweight merchant who behaved frivolously and had already buried 3 wives. When the merchant met Hortense for the first time, he even proposed paying 20,000 francs just for a chance to see her graceful figure. Hortense was frightened by this crude man. Hearing the commotion, Bet hurried over to see what was happening. Seeing that the merchant was extremely angry, Bet tried to calm him down by offering to introduce Jenny to him, which finally eased his temper, because just the day before, Bet had learned from Jenny that the Baron had not provided her with any financial support for a long time, which made it seem that he could barely protect himself now. Bet also passed this information on to her niece Hortense. That very night when Bet returned home, she smelled a foul odor spreading through the hallway. Following the direction of the smoke, she discovered a young man in a small second-floor room who was attempting to end his life by burning charcoal. Seeing the young man's handsome face, Bet felt her heart stirred uncontrollably, and she saved him and carefully cared for him for 3 days and 3 nights. When the young man finally woke up, he could hardly believe that he was still alive. During their conversation, the young man learned that it was Bet who had stayed by his side with tireless care and brought him back to life. It was also the first time Bet had ever been in such close contact with a man, and her heart had already begun pounding wildly. A few days later, under Betty's introduction, the wealthy merchant came to watch Jenny's performance. With just a single glance, he was completely captivated by Jenny. Backstage after the show, the merchant arrived carrying expensive gifts and waited to meet Jenny, but the Baron also followed him there. A man who had once nearly become his son-in-law but had now turned into his rival. Betty's life suddenly seemed bright and hopeful after the young man appeared in it. Every day after finishing work, she carefully prepared food and waited for the young man to come upstairs and share dinner with her. The young man was deeply moved, and after they grew closer he told Bet that his name was Wenceslas, a struggling sculptor whose works had not sold a single piece. Bet firmly believed in his talent, and she decided to use her lifelong savings to help Wenceslas achieve success and fame. They maintained a delicate relationship somewhere between friendship and romance, living together day after day. In order to display Wenceslas's sculptures, Bet went to work as a cleaner in an antique shop, refusing any salary and asking only that the owner leave a window spot to display Wenceslas's work. Wenceslas clearly knew that Bet treated him this way because she loved him, yet he never responded to her feelings, nor did he reject her. However, Bet foolishly believed that this kind of relationship meant they were lovers. With growing confidence, she once again boasted to Hortense about how outstanding her boyfriend was, and how young and handsome he looked. These words inevitably made Hortense curious about the man her aunt kept talking about, Wenceslas. She longed to see what such a man was really like. Before long, through Betty's efforts, Wenceslas's sculpture successfully appeared in the antique shop, and Bet, who loved showing off her man in front of Hortense, casually told her that her boyfriend's work had already been admired and collected by the antique shop owner. One day, Hortense pretended to ask her father to take a walk with her, and deliberately led the Baron to that antique shop by taking a detour. Hortense acted as if she were just browsing the store, and only after asking the owner several questions did she finally confirm which sculpture belonged to Wenceslas. When the owner named the price, Hortense surprisingly did not bargain at all and decided to buy the sculpture. At that very moment, Wenceslas walked into the shop, and after a brief conversation Hortense confirmed his identity and they exchanged contact information. When Wenceslas returned home, he excitedly told Bet that his sculpture had finally been sold. After receiving a passionate kiss from Wenceslas, Bet became even more convinced that he loved her just as much. But in the blink of an eye, Wenceslas went to visit the Baron. After seeing the Baron's prestigious status, Wenceslas felt as though one foot had already stepped into the world of high society. What Bet did not know was that her own niece was planning to steal her lover. Hortense hid outside the door watching the handsome Wenceslas, and she already felt certain of her victory. The Baron was also willing to gamble his future on Wenceslas's talent, and he immediately agreed to allow him to pursue Hortense. From that moment on, Wenceslas often secretly met Hortense behind Betty's back. In terms of age, beauty, identity, and status, Hortense surpassed Bet in every way. On this point, Wenceslas was perfectly clear. When the dinner clock struck 3 times and Wenceslas still had not returned home, Bet began to feel puzzled, and a sense of foreboding crept into her heart. Meanwhile, Wenceslas was whispering sweet words with Hortense in the park, having already forgotten that Bet even existed. When he finally took out his pocket watch to check the time, he offered no explanation, hurriedly said goodbye to Hortense, and ran desperately toward home. Men can be this ruthless, wanting everything at once, in order to leave themselves a way out. Before they are absolutely certain they can win one side, they are unwilling to give up either. Sure enough, when he returned home, Bet confronted Wenceslas with a dark expression and demanded to know where he had been fooling around. Wenceslas had no desire to explain, because he had gradually grown tired of Bet. Just as he stood up to leave, Bet suddenly softened and even apologized for her own outburst. In order to make herself look younger, Bet went to Jenny and asked her to teach her how to dress and present herself. But in Jenny's room, she unexpectedly saw the sculpture that Wenceslas had sold. Jenny told her that it was a gift from the Baron yesterday, and she had heard it came from a struggling sculptor. The Baron had also told her that the sculptor was soon going to become his son-in-law. Hearing this felt like a bolt from the blue to Bet, as if the sky above her had suddenly collapsed. Her cousin had taken away her status, and now her cousin's daughter was stealing the man she loved. A terrifying plan for revenge began to take shape in Betty's heart. When she followed Wenceslas and witnessed the two of them together with her own eyes, she hid in the shadows, grinding her teeth with hatred, and the regrets and anger of half her life poured out all at once. From that moment on, Hortense, fully aware that she had hurt her aunt, completely cut off all contact with Bet. After confirming his wedding date with Hortense, Wenceslas finally laid everything out honestly to Bet. He said that he had always depended on Bet like a mother, and apart from that there had never been any other feelings. Bet did not argue or make a scene. She only said one sentence,
"May God protect you."
Before long, the Baron borrowed money to hold a lavish wedding for his daughter. His friends all knew about his current situation, and their sarcastic congratulations filled with hidden mockery left the Baron restless and irritated. Amid the noise and celebration, Bet also walked in. The Baron's estate appeared lively and grand, and the kind of bankruptcy that high society nobles talked about seemed to have no effect on their lives at all. The newlyweds were inseparable, and Bet arrived at the perfect moment. Just as the ball had begun, under the romantic music, Hortense and Wenceslas looked dazzling and radiant. However, Betty's sudden appearance left both of them uneasy. Yet Bet did nothing inappropriate, and instead she offered the couple sincere congratulations. Hortense innocently believed that her aunt's generosity came from concern for their family bond, but no one noticed the strange look hidden in Betty's eyes. A year passed, and Wenceslas and Hortense had a son. Bet took the initiative and offered to come help take care of them. Watching the young couple sweetly enjoying the sunshine together in the courtyard, Bet grew so angry that she threw the cup in her hand to the ground. Wenceslas was still unknown and unsuccessful, and Hortense gradually began to feel some disappointment toward her husband, but she still believed that one day his talent would finally shine. Under the excuse of introducing businessmen to him, Bet often brought Wenceslas to meet the regular patrons of the theater. During these gatherings, Wenceslas gradually revealed his true nature. He even flirted with worldly women in front of his wife just like his father-in-law did, and boldly pulled them into his arms. At this time the Baron was already facing financial ruin, yet their standard of living had not dropped in the slightest. When the Baron's son reminded him that they already owed enormous debts and that some former acquaintances had begun demanding repayment, the Baron always acted as if it did not matter at all. When the nephew complained to Bet about his father, Bet told him that those underground moneylenders had very low borrowing requirements and that he could try his luck there. Following Betty's suggestion, the Baron's son truly managed to borrow a huge sum of 30,000 francs from an underground lender. In order to cut expenses, the Baron's son dismissed half of the maids in the household. Watching her cousin's family gradually decline, Bet secretly felt a sense of satisfaction. At the same time, in order to provoke her brother-in-law, Bet teamed up with Jenny and arranged a situation where rivals would meet face to face. When the wealthy merchant appeared from among the elegantly dressed women, the Baron, who had been personally granted his noble title by the king, felt deeply humiliated by such a scene. Encouraged by Betty's subtle manipulation, the Baron decided to challenge the merchant to a duel. At that time dueling carried legal recognition, and if one side died in the duel, the other party would bear no responsibility. But in the end neither of them struck a fatal blow, and Betty's plan to eliminate someone using another person's hand failed. As time went on, the family's expenses continued to exceed their income. Looking at his still unsuccessful son-in-law, the Baron's anger burned fiercely. To the Baron, Wenceslas had never truly been treated as a son-in-law, because he had always seen him only as an investment. After the Baron left, Hortense's brother also scolded them, insisting that they must take responsibility for some of the family's expenses no matter what. The debt from the underground lender, combined with outrageous interest, had already grown to more than 5 times the original amount, and every day he faced violent threats demanding repayment. Their father was useless, and now the daughter and son-in-law were the same. He swore that he would no longer support this family, and that at worst he would follow his wife back to her parents' home and start a new life there. Looking at this chaotic and troubled family in front of her, Bet quietly smiled to herself from the side. Wenceslas's pride was deeply wounded, and when the truth that he depended on others for support was exposed so openly, he felt unbearable shame. After everyone else left, Bet offered Wenceslas a suggestion, saying that she had a very wealthy friend, and considering their relationship, Jenny might be willing to help Wenceslas. At the same time, in order to raise her son, Hortense, who had already lost the protection of her brother, decided to seek out the wealthy merchant who once pursued her. She set aside her pride and declared that if the merchant was willing to lend her money, she would allow him to see her body. In just 2 short years their roles had completely reversed, and the irony of it all was impossible to ignore. But what even Bet did not expect was that the merchant Crevel did not behave improperly toward Hortense. On the contrary, he felt genuine sympathy for the girl and generously lent her 20,000 francs. However, what Hortense did not know was that after watching Jenny perform, her husband had already developed improper thoughts about the incredibly alluring actress. And in truth, all of this had been secretly arranged by Jenny in advance in order to help her friend carry out her revenge. Jenny only needed to show the slightest initiative before Wenceslas became so excited that he completely lost his sense of direction, because novelty is often a fatal weakness for men. As time passed, Wenceslas gradually threw himself into this new affair. Bet would regularly visit Jenny to ask about the progress of their plan. Jenny told her that everything was proceeding exactly as they had arranged. Meanwhile, Bet began deliberately revealing to Hortense that Wenceslas had already betrayed her, while her brother-in-law was asleep during his afternoon rest. Bet also told him the exact place where Wenceslas and Jenny were meeting in secret. Hortense rushed there in a carriage, desperate to catch them together. At the same time, the Baron also left the house carrying a rifle. Inside a room at the inn, Wenceslas and Jenny were lost in their private encounter. Completely unaware that a nightmare was about to arrive, the Baron reached the inn first, and father and daughter searched through the building one after the other. When the Baron heard sounds and walked toward a guest room, the scene inside made him collapse instantly. At the same time, Hortense also saw her father. Even after Wenceslas's unfaithful behavior was exposed, he showed no intention of explaining himself to his wife, and he simply stopped returning home as if it were the most natural thing in the world. The Baron fell seriously ill because of the shock. Bet continued speaking coldly in front of both father and daughter about Wenceslas's heartlessness, making the hatred in their hearts grow even deeper. The Baron's health grew weaker and weaker. Hortense and Bet soon noticed that the Baron was constantly gripping a rifle in his hands. Not long afterward, Hortense went downstairs, whispered something into her father's ear, and when she stood up the rifle had disappeared. Bet seemed to realize what was about to happen, yet she made no attempt to stop it. Just as Wenceslas suggested that he and Jenny should run away together, Jenny immediately rejected him. At that very moment, a knock suddenly sounded at the door.
Go.
The gunshot that followed struck Wenceslas at a fatal point. Before Wenceslas could even be buried, the police had already arrived at the house. Hortense looked helplessly toward her aunt, hoping that Bet might help her, but Bet answered with chilling calm, "May God protect you." After taking one final look at Wenceslas, Bet left with the same cold expression, leaving Jenny standing there in stunned silence. Yet Bet did not abandon her paralyzed brother-in-law, and she remained in the Baron's house to take care of both the Baron and Hortense's son. Through all her schemes, she finally gained the sense of power she had long desired. Betty's life was tragic, because her cousin had taken up all the resources of the family and left her destined to live in poverty. And when her niece stole away the man she loved, she completely lost her sense of reason. Once the seed of terrible revenge is planted, the final result is often destruction on both sides. She was terrifying, yet she was also a pitiful and tragic figure. If you have never endured another person's suffering, do not be quick to judge their choices. Bet spent her entire life trapped by the shadow of her cousin's family. This film is adapted from Balzac's novel Cousin Bet. The hypocrisy of human nature, the hunger for wealth, and the collapse of moral boundaries are portrayed vividly through the characters created by Balzac.